I appreciate everyone coming today. And this is a little bit rough because we haven't done this together. Hello? Hello?
That's not too bad. Okay.
So
I'll go through. Unfortunately, our book does not have everything in it that we do. There's a couple that's missing. I apologize. And also the English explanations. Some of them are pretty good, and some of them don't say much.
爸爸，你有回应？
It's better not to wear the earrings.
Yeah, it's doubling, isn't
I can
it?
hear you just fine. Your voice is much better.
Okay. It's small enough room, yeah.
It's like
You don't need to hear me twice. That's
a
good.
llama in stereo. Yeah.
That's good. Yeah. But anyway, the guru asked me to commence a practice here when he's not able to come, which I do in several locations now for him, as he's empowered me with the empowerment of the Medicine Buddha and also the Jambalaya to do these rituals. Now, for those of you who are new, this is what we call the tantric or varja practice, and it's a quite esoteric practice because it originates in Tibet, because our guru studied in Western China and Tibet both. So he carries the lineage from both sides of the Mahayana tradition and also the Tibetan tantric traditions. So this one is actually closer to Tibetan, and that's why it's confusing in here. To me, it was a lot of times, and some of our other translations are confusing. We have 4 languages in here, basically. English, the Tibetan alliteration, Chinese in one version, which is an old version, similar, a little bit copying some of the Tibetan. And then below is a second Chinese version, so that's why it's kind of hard to follow your first time through, because this is a simplified Chinese version. But normally during events we don't follow this one. It can be confusing because there are some events that we do where we do this part. And it's like we have to learn, I have to learn when to skip by maybe a long passage of the first section and pick up where we're doing the second part. And this one, it isn't too bad once you get used to it. So that's one of the things that happens. And the opinion, we might call it, of course, the Anglicization of the pronunciations are sometimes hit and miss. They're mostly accurate in here. There is one I realized at the 100th syllable, which this is, the 100th syllable is something we do quite a bit. And sometimes we do it for 30 minutes or more. And sometimes 108 of them, because it's very auspicious and meritorious for our spiritual quest. And I noticed this is something that happens sometimes. The first phrase we repeat 3 times, but then it becomes, and the opinion says W-E-N-G. Well, basically that's another way the opinion does Om. O-M. So that's confusing. I've gotten lost sometimes trying to follow an opinion because I've done this a long time, and mostly I can follow along, but I always have to remember when I see that word in the English opinion that it's Om. And I'm not sure why they do opinion, because sometimes they do Om, O-M, and sometimes they do W-E-N-G. It's just part of the... I don't think we can blame this one on AI.
Really? That's what he said.
Some people say that always have trouble
It's
following.
pronounced Om.
Yes.
I just
Feels
put it
so
in
bad.
parentheses.
No, it's okay.
Just in that one truck.
It took me quite a few years to follow. I'll tell you the truth. Although my background was not particularly religious, although my grandmother was a fervent Seventh-day Adventist, and I have a cousin who's a minister, who's a very nice person, and he's done missionary work. It's like building schools and stuff,
Wow.
very sincere work rather than just proselytizing, which is one of the things I don't like about Christianity a lot. And I try not to do it with Buddhism, because people should come to their understandings and their spiritual beliefs through their heart and through what they believe and what they acknowledge as they learn in the world. And it took me over 50 years to find Buddhism with my second wife, when she introduced me to the temples. And I realized I could chant the sutras. Probably, the master says, because in a prior life I was Chinese, or perhaps Vietnamese, one of those. Because I served in Vietnam, and I did learn Vietnamese for a while. I don't know Mandarin, but I know words and some phrases and some things like that, but I've never, at my age, I've just never had the chance to study and learn it. I would love to. It's such a fascinating language, Chinese is, especially the characters are so wonderful. But it's kind of some of my story too. Anyway, what I just wanted to say was it's so wonderful to do this here. I've only ever been in the airport probably before several times. I've never gotten out of the airport. So it's nice to come down. Yeah, otherwise, I've been one time up in Appleton, Wisconsin. I've been in
That's an
Minneapolis.
obscure destination.
Well, it was a convention. They had a convention center there. Yeah, it is rather obscure, yeah. I had never heard of it before I went there, and I know a lot of geography. But yeah, so this makes another place I can put on my list of places I've visited and enjoyed. Particularly, I always enjoy meeting new people and seeing them, and seeing that as we all guide through the life that we are struggling with, because life is always a struggle. Very seldom is it very smooth. It may be for a while, but generally there's ups and downs always. And, that's one of the things, you know, we have to learn to accept, because life is temporary. I mean, comparatively, look, you know, we just need to live every day the best we can and be the best persons we can, and learn from our mistakes, because we're all going to make mistakes. It doesn't matter who we are or how perfect we think we are, because that's another flaw, is to have arrogance, of course, and believe that you know everything, know the right way, everything. So this has been a learning experience. I've been studying Buddhism now for, since 1998, was when I met my second wife, who was from Taiwan, and who introduced me to this. And now, in 2018, we both accepted the ordination, and she became a nun, and I became a monk. And it's a wonderful opportunity. The Guru gave us this opportunity to accept into the Sangha. And it's a challenge, especially here in the United States. Of course, in Asia, you would go to a monastery, basically. And we're creating a monastery with a house, but it's like our financial obligations, everything surrounding our personal life is very difficult to just drop. It's like it takes a while to get rid of a lot of things. It's not like material things. I've not developed a need for a lot of material things in my life, but there's financial obligations, and there's different things and stuff that go together that make it a hard transition. So we do the best we can with the skills as we learn them, and we try to adjust and obey the precepts the best we can, which is also difficult in the United States because a lot of the precepts were set up more for austerity places where you're going to be in a monastery all the time, and that's different. And also because basically the Tibetan practice is different than a lot of the practices, because Buddhism has so many different practices by culture, and the Tibetan practice is different. There are a couple other practices, the Laotians. I have Laotian friends, and they meet even in the temple, because it's just parts of following what they go along with. Now, we all try to avoid killing animals, and we don't want to kill them for the benefit of eating, but in Tibet, they need meat to survive on, and so they eat meat as well. But of course, in order to minimize our impact on the land in the Western world the best we can, we need to start trying to, best we can, to becoming vegetarians. I'm a vegetarian most of the time because I'm in a temple most of the time. But I have 2 days a week where I'm outside the temple. And the Guru says my body has not adapted, and it's difficult for me to get enough protein yet. And so even at my age, I still have to have a little bit more nourishment. And so I don't I try not to eat to enjoy, although I've always enjoyed eating, but I try to eat to live and keep my body healthy, because I turned 80 years old last November, and I'm blessed because on a couple of different accounts, and the girl, when I met him, I could tell there was something different, because even though we do mostly sound meditations with the Tibetan practice rather than silent meditations, I had struggled to meditate. I met him in 2007, 8, something like that. And so I had been trying to practice for 10 years, and I had very much struggled. I did initially, the second year, I had a nun at one of the temples in Portland. She gave me the Diamond Sutra and told me to read it 21 times. I read it 21 times and I didn't understand it. And only recently I found an actual English translation with references to all the Chinese studies by all the masters that gives me insight into what it is, because it's written so simply. And actually the message is very simple, but it's done in a very different manner. It's a different type of teaching. I will as I am able to, but the concept of emptiness and the concept of a void and the form of void is not something that the English words necessarily spell out correctly. There's no nuances to that. And please take your time. Yeah, don't.
Well, sit on a chair.
I just sprained it, it's fine.
Oh,
I just,
oh, no.
sorry.
So that's like, it's like, the guru told me, he said, I can tell, you don't need to be studying all the time. He says, you have a kind heart, and you have already developed compassion. Because my mother taught me not to kill things. Even though, and with a broader family, there were times my family depended upon killing things. It was part of their ability to survive in this world. And but from the time I was in first grade, and a hummingbird flew into our house. And she went over and she slowly, against the window, was trying to get out in the kitchen, captured it, and had it in her palms. And she walked over to me and she gave me this hummingbird and she said, feel it, and then take it out and release it. And I could feel the hummingbird's heartbeat. Oh, it's so fast, so incredibly fast. And they're so beautiful, but they're so temporary too. They're so fragile and everything. And so I took it out and released it. And that was one of my first lessons about the fragility of life and things like that. And then when that was just after I was just turned 5, and 2 months after I turned 5, my father died of a massive heart attack. And I did not really get exposed to the trauma of that much, because it was just like he was gone. They didn't want to disturb me and things like that. But there was a void in my life, a whole lot of my life. I got a good stepfather a few years later, and he was different, but he was good in a lot of ways, and taught me things too. But those are the kind of things. And then I was, my grandmother had me read a lot of literature for the Seventh-day Adventists, which a lot of it is anti-Catholic literature, because they're very anti-Catholic. But I had already been a reader since before I was in first grade, because my mother taught me to read. So I was fortunate, because my stepfather was a logger and a welder, and for the first 8 years of my schooling, we moved all around the Northwest. I went to 12 different grade schools. And so I was fortunate scholastically. I had no problems. It was difficult socially. I was always socially behind, until we got to Portland in the 7th grade, and my mother told him she'd like me to stay and go to one high school rather than move around. And he abided by that, and we stayed there for the rest of my life. And so I've lived in Portland off and on, except for I was in college as a math major, philosophy, second major, and I was drafted in my 5th year trying to get my degree, which was rather interesting, because my great-grandfather, who I knew because he died when I was about 8 or 9 years old, he had been born in Germany in 1858, and his parents brought him to the United States when he was 3 years old, so they migrated to Michigan. and then my grandmother was born there. And part of the story of them leaving Germany was that they were in Prussia, and all of them had to serve in conscription all the time. So I thought it was rather ironic that I got a call from Uncle Sam, and I was not in a position to do anything like leave or anything. I was a homeboy. I didn't have a car. I didn't, even in college, I didn't have a car. I rode the bus, and so it's like, okay, I have an obligation to my country, and I try to do the best I can, even though I may not believe in what this is they're trying to do. And I went, and that's where I really was introduced to a lot of the temporariness in life, a lot of tragedy and everything. But that's also why later on then I adapted Buddhism, because I realized when I met my second wife and she introduced me to the sutras and to beliefs, and I started reading them a little more. I had read a little bit before, and I realized I had grown up with beliefs that were very similar. Not exactly the same, but a lot like Buddhism, and that it was closer than anything that I had ever seen before. And also I realized that there was a path to removing a lot of the bad memories I had from being in the Army. Not to necessarily remove them, but to settle them, to bring them to a level where they were okay for me. Like, it's like when you go through trauma, it doesn't matter. Everybody goes through trauma of different kinds in their lives. And when you go through it, sometimes it's very difficult to separate from it. And I know my first wife was an incest victim, and she could never separate from that. She was in therapy our whole marriage, which was 25 years. And I worked through Vietnam while we were together, and she helped me a great deal. And I tried to help her through her problems and things, and she kept going to therapists and stuff, but it was very difficult, and it never did work out. And it's like, we kind of went like this. When we got married, she was an extrovert, and I was totally introvert. When we finally split up, it had almost totally reversed. I'm not a total extrovert, but I was just totally different than I was when I first met her, and it collapsed into herself, and I was not able to help her. And I had to realize that at a certain point, and I had to get out of that relationship, because all I was doing was assisting the bad things. I wasn't helping anymore, and we have to realize that sometimes in our lives, that sometimes our best efforts are not the right efforts to help people. We have to understand when it's the right thing to do and when it's the wrong thing to do things. And sometimes our best intentions that we may have grown up learning that we should do are not always the right things to deal with a certain person who's in a certain state in their life. And that's a very difficult thing to learn as we grow older, but it's something that I learned pretty well. Because now she's kind of my ex-wife now, because we're not officially married as far as Buddhism is concerned, but I gravitated to strong women in my life because my mother, even though she was just a housewife, she was strong, and all of her sisters, she had 5 sisters, and her mother raised all of them by herself, because my grandfather on that side came and went, and she had kids, and then finally he got kicked out of the house. And so all of my aunts were powerful women in their own way, including my mother. And so it's funny. So sometimes we gravitate to that in our life as we grow older. And that's when I met my first wife. She was quite strong and everything. And then Julie, my Taiwanese wife, very strong personality. A lot of people don't like her because she's forthright and she wants people to do things the right way. And so we try to be flexible in the temple, but sometimes she's my biggest critic, and that's good for me, because I need to be kept straight. Because otherwise I would probably be out there in the pubs drinking beer. The truth. Because I went through a lot of that when I got out of the Army, of self-destruction with different sources and things. But the Guru not only gave me an opportunity to be a monk, and when I say my name, a lot of times, like when I recite, I'm a student, I'll say my given ordained monk name, which is Shi Hung Jae. Shi being master, Hung Jae being, I'm supposed to put the hammer down, and I have a hard time with that. I've never been a hard person. I always got in trouble in the Army, even though I made sergeant because I wasn't strict enough with people. But it's a good opportunity for me. But that's, I have that name. I have the Lama name, Shashi Chaiwan Dorje Lama, which he initially was Chaiwan Dorje, Shashi Chaiwan. And then what happened was he wants to have the lineage continued. And so even though I'm older, he thinks I make a living. So I'm the first person to have the lineage name. There will be others. But he gave me the lineage name because he says I'll live another 20 years. And it's very possible. A lot of my family, even though my father had a massive heart attack, have lived to be 90, between 90 and 100. And I went through that when I was 62, and he helped me because I had a heart attack. And I wondered, because of my father, at some point I might have one. But I've been healthy, I've been an athlete and everything, but when I had a heart attack, my wife, rather than wait for an ambulance, my wife put me in the car because I knew what was happening, I knew the symptoms. And we drove about 5 miles to the hospital, and every single light turned for us. And when I got to the hospital, they couldn't stabilize my blood pressure, or my pulse. It was very difficult. 2 or 3 doctors came in. Until finally one doctor came in, and he put his hand on my shoulder. And by then the guru knew what was happening with me. And it was the guru's hand from far away. He put his hand on my shoulder, and my pulse rate went down to normal, and they were able to proceed with things. And so when I did eventually have bypass surgery, and the guru had people praying for me, at least 2 continents. And my cousin, who's a minister in Seventh-day Adventist world, he had our family and all of them praying for me, and all these prayers really assisted me because it was miraculous. I mean, I am short of breath. I still have trouble, and I don't like that because I used to like to exercise heavily and everything, but it's part of living and part of just accepting where you are. And so it's helpful. And besides which, now, being able to meditate, I'm able to control my blood pressure much better after I learned from the guru and his meditative techniques, how to be able to relax and calm myself. It's like in meditation, we can't expect everything to go away. There's so much in our head. It's not going to, most of the time until you get way advanced, it's not going to go away. We have to learn how to settle it and accept it and just focus the best we can. And to me, my focus enhanced after I started learning about the Medicine Buddha and the representation of the Medicine Buddha as blue. Because in my meditations, all of a sudden I started to have a blue curtain come down, very deep, dark blue. And at times I'll see different colors as well, greens or very bright lights. But for me, I know that I'm relaxing and more meditative when I see the deep, dark blue of the Medicine Buddha. And so the Guru's practice and his trying to help people with his Tibetan medicine practice and his Chinese medicine practice is very good for everyone. I try to encourage everybody, to do what they can with it. Sometimes we need the American medicines and American things. There's some certain things and times that we have to have them because some of them are very well developed and good. It's just that over the long term for our health and stuff, the things that we do for our body to prevent things from happening are much better than the trying to resolve the issues once they're here in our body, because that's much more difficult. But, so anyway, I'll stop talking because I don't want to keep everybody. I'm not sure what time it is, but we'll have.
Yeah, we still have time. So if you have question, you could raise your question.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, I do have a question because I think if you you do Dharma practice, you probably want to, because Guru mentioned on several occasions that you have great connection with him.
Yes.
By heart. And I know that you don't know Chinese, right? And
Right.
Guru doesn't really know English, so he has all his
He's
meditation.
getting better, but right.
Yeah, he's getting better. Yeah, but everything like in the meditation, he's speak in Chinese. So I was wonder how you made that connection. And let me stop and then tell you in Chinese to them. 上师在很多个场合都说，拉玛跟他是三密相应，就是说是跟上师是完全相应的。上师有提过好几次。那我一直都很好奇，拉玛不懂中文，对不对？然后上师不懂英文，那他们怎么相应这样子？And then that leads to another question. Then how do you do your Dharma practice like when you don't know Chinese? So that's like I wanted to.
Well, the second part first, maybe, because my Dharma practice, I get up between 5 and 5:30, and I study. I have a book that I read every morning to invoke the spirit and everything, and it's in combination because a lot of it is in English. I slowly had help, and I've also translated myself with the assist of Google translation and stuff, and figuring out what it does correctly and what it doesn't. But so I have a mixture. Mostly our mantras and some of the things like in here, the 100 syllables and things like that we do with the Chinese. And so I have no problem. And the sutras, sometimes I read my English version in order to understand better, because I do have English versions of now, quite a few sutras. A lot of them are available on the internet. So I don't necessarily usually struggle. There are a couple of sutras you get to translate that are from Chengdu, from the Jiaoye temple, that they have not been able to translate yet for me, or even give me opinion, which I struggle, so I meditate, basically. So it's not really an issue, because I've done it now long enough too. And in fact, a lot of from the time I first started hearing some of the sutras, like the Amitabha Sutra, the Kuan Yin Sutra, some of those, I've heard them so much, I've done them so much, even in Chinese, that I can follow along pretty well. Sometimes even without looking at the pinyin, but it's because of just memorization through rote over and over and over again. And that's part of doing my study in the morning, every morning for 3 to 4 hours, is the rotation. It seems, I wondered why we always do the same thing, but then occasionally he'll have us change up something, changes part of the nature of living. As far as my connection to him, for several years before I became a monk, we had our meditations down in Los Angeles. We have a temple in La Puente. It's very nice. And so we had big meditations down there. And I went down there starting in 2011 or 12. And so I started to realize, sometimes I had translations that were decent and sometimes I didn't. But I started to realize that there was a feeling, and that I could feel his energy and his power. And that's a strange feeling, because I've never been a real believer in a lot of things. I mean, I've seen one ghost at least in my life, but I've not been a very spiritual person or anything until a ways down the road with the spiritual practice. And I started to realize that there was something special about him, and that sometimes I could feel inside of me what was going on. There was no translation. It didn't matter. You could feel what he was conveying in general, whether I had a translator or not. And it wasn't like spoken words or anything. It was just like I could tell by his motions and his speech some of what he was conveying, which helped a bunch. And then when he started teaching us some of the healing things, like with the medicine bowl and different things like that, it was like I had to have some translation on that, but a lot of it was just by feel and that kind of a thing. And his ability, at one point, it was a very strange feeling. He did this exercise, and I can't remember if I can describe it exactly right, but he said, okay, think of a wall in front of you, and you can't receive through it. It's so strong that you can't perceive what's on the other side. And in a sense, that's like an analogy, like you can't receive a teaching, or you can't hear or understand. And he said, I'm going to put my finger through that wall, and I want you to see if you can feel it. And he sat there for a while with his finger like this. And as I sat there, I could feel it. And it's hard to describe what it felt like, even. But I knew I could feel it. And that was him touching me, which is very strange. I mean, I've always been averse to being afraid of having a teacher because of cults and things like that. I never wanted to get involved in those. And we had, in Oregon, we had a very big cult 40 years ago, Rajneeshpuram. And they bought a lot of construction materials from the company I worked for. They would come roll in with their trucks and their orange robes and things. And they also had their ranch out in an area in eastern Oregon where I was familiar with where it was, a small town called Antelope I'd been through and traveled to eastern Oregon. So I was always a little skeptical of things. But also, I felt this connection with him, and then one of the assignments one time was to read Tsongkhapa, 15th century Tibetan master who wrote and condensed a lot of things about Buddhism. And when I read that one, I understood why in Tibetan teachings we want a guru, we want a teacher. Now, we're not being taught to follow this teacher blindly. We should never do anything illegal, immoral, anything like that. And that's where sometimes the distinction between a teacher and their students can go wrong, like what happened in Oregon at one time. Because there was all of a sudden a power structure, and nobody ever knows whether he was really involved or not. But it was like, how could he not know, kind of thing. And they did a lot of bad things. They tried to poison the salad bar in the Dallas, Oregon, because they wanted to reduce the number of voters in the county so they could have a majority of voting. I had a friend who was a justice of the peace in Hood River. They followed him in his car. He was a former Vietnam veteran. And he knew he came to Portland to attend, we were building the Oregon Vietnam Memorial, and he came to Portland there, and he said, they're out there, they're sitting out there in their car, they follow me around. And he says, because I made a judgment as a justice of the peace that they didn't like. So there were, obviously at that time already, we could tell there were bad people in this group. Even though there was a lot of good people following them. I mean, it wasn't, there was a lot of good people involved in the group and everything. And they did a remarkable thing with what they built out there in the desert. But, so that's some of my skepticism. But when I read Tsongkhapa, he says in there, he says about how you need to distinguish and you need to learn yourself how to decide what's right and what's wrong. You can't depend totally on your guru. You want to follow him the best of your abilities because he's your teacher, and you want to follow your teacher in order to maximize what your growth potential is and what you can learn about Buddhism. But if your teacher does something wrong, if it's not a great big thing, you just kind of, go along, and stuff. And I mean, I've had that with the guru because there's times it may be understanding because of the languages and stuff, but there's times I don't agree whatsoever. But it's nothing immoral or illegal or anything like that. So it's like, okay, he knows what he's doing, I would do it differently, but okay, I'm a follower. And that's something that's important to learn in life too, is when you need to be a follower and when you need to be a leader. And that's difficult. And I learned that a bit when I was in the Army, because there's a big distinction in armies in the world. Because, and actually, that's why Ukraine has survived, is because they studied our non-commissioned officer structure, the structure of our leaders who are not the senior officers. They studied the men who actually lead the guys on the ground. And that's what I was in Vietnam. I became a non-commissioned officer. And they run the Army in the United States. And they're the ones that make everybody know that they have to think independently. in order to survive. That they can't just blindly walk. Even though the Army's telling you that and teaching you to do that, you end up realizing you have to sometimes make your own decisions, and they may not quite abide by what they're telling you up there, and that's some of what happened in Vietnam too, because as things got worse and worse, the lower guys started making decisions independent of what they were being told to do, because they knew it wasn't right what we were generally doing. So that's the same thing on any structure, on any level where you have a senior person, you know. And the guru he has great vision. I can tell his vision is to enhance the learning of the public here in the United States, to Buddhism, and to create a bigger and larger community. Now, Buddhism has been growing for quite a number of years throughout the United States. There are different forms of it. There are limited sections too. There's other practitioners of the Tibetan practice as well as us. But so it's just interesting, and you know, he's done a lot of great things so far, and I have not had a fault with any of the basic things and things. It's just sometimes practice. We all have our own ways, the way we want to do things at times, when we have to learn to adapt to that. But that's part of distinguishing between when we're our follower and when we're a leader. Because in any group of people, it's going to break down a little bit that way. It's hard to have a communal structure that is all equal, because we're all so different. But it's still like we all have to have respect, and that's the basic thing. It doesn't matter who we're following or who amongst us is speaking up or trying to lead. We all have to have respect for each other's beliefs and our opinions, and the fact that we're human and that we make mistakes. It doesn't matter. So, you know, it's very difficult in these times in the United States to accept some of the mistakes that are going on right now. Personally, I have a very hard time. I have to refrain. I don't watch the news, but I do keep track of what's going on generally. I just feel that's a safer way to live a life. It's that you can't just totally go away. It would be nice if we could go away to the woods and practice and not have to deal with the things, but it affects us all, and so we have to go the best we can. But that's part of the thing is we have to learn what we can tolerate and what we can't. And in Buddhism, there's big distinctions, because I was amazed with the Vietnamese Buddhists during the war, because they took a stand and they did not change their stand, because they knew they were right. And they even burned themselves as a sacrifice to show the purity of their thought and what they would do. There was 2 or 3 monks who had other monks pour gasoline on them and light them on fire, and they accepted it because their belief was so strong. One of those monks, everything burned but his heart, because they say he was such a pure heart, he had such a pure mind. And so that's one of the things I saw with Buddhism too, as I was growing up and going through a lot of things. Was, there's something different about that. To me, it made a lot of sense. Okay, our heart is very important. Now, there's supposedly in Western society, there's a distinction between our mind and our heart. But in Buddhism, you kind of wonder as you study it, it's kind of all tied together. It's a separation. And besides which, we don't know where we're going afterwards anyway. We don't know what else is out there, because there's other stuff out there. We know that. There's potentially another dimension or more. I don't go into that deeply or anything, because that's beyond our capacity, basically. Some people are able to see things and some people can't. Because I've known a number of people in my life who've been able to see dead people. I don't believe it. I don't believe it was just them making it up. Now, a lot of times we don't talk about that. Personally, if I encounter that stuff, and to some extent some of my beliefs, I don't believe in trying to impress anybody or trying to make people think I'm at some extreme level. We're all at different levels. It doesn't matter. we're all learning as human beings. That's just a part of nature and where we are. And so I'm no different. It doesn't matter. Maybe in Buddhism, maybe my level's a little bit different, but it's not. I'm not any different as a person or anything. I just happen to have a specialty now in some rituals and things that I never would have thought I would have ever done. And so I'm rather pleased that I've been able to do this, because I had a lot of times in my life where I failed to follow through on some things. And I don't regret them now, they're past, but it's like, I feel like I've done much better with this belief and this practice, and been able to follow the Guru and assist his struggles and his efforts, and relieve some of the burden on him. So it makes me happy to know that I could do that. And that's one of the chief things is, let's try to keep happiness and joy in our life, and a little laughter. A good deal of laughter helps at times. Some people think that our practice is so solemn and so, and it is in a way, I have to admit. And things like that, because we're not a party group, we're not gonna do that necessarily, although when we get together sometimes, we have a good time and everything separately. But it's just a little different, because we're trying to maintain a healthy respect for what it is that we're trying to practice, is basically, and not everybody's gonna need to do the same way. We're all separate and different, and we're gonna have different feelings, and we're all, it's fine, even like, a lot of times we have guests in Portland at our temple, and a lot of times they don't get it, it doesn't get explained, because we have only a handful of I don't know what the term is anymore, because I can't call them Americans, because we're all Americans. But a handful of people who aren't familiar with the practice, or with Chinese practices, or Chinese speaking and things, and sometimes the things don't get explained very well when they come in and they sit and stuff, but that's fine. If I get a chance, I go and try to explain things to them. But if I'm part of the practice, then it's not always possible. I'll be in a position where I can't get up and move around. I try to do, although it's changed a little bit this year so far, but it's supposed to change back. I try to do one practice a month on our Sundays, where we have a Sunday practice book, and it has part of this in it. And I try to do it in English, where I read a whole lot of the stuff in English, except for the chanting and things like that. And then, as you can see, as I go to other places, we kind of adapt, and this was the first time here, so we kind of have to adapt to see how we can mix it and do it. Anyway, that's a long reply to her answer. Got everybody out, I'm sorry. If there's any more questions, that's fine, I can answer them, or we can talk to them at lunch or anything.
I have a question.
Yes.
I didn't hear you singing the 100 whatever that's by Jimenzo. I want to hear you singing, but I was kind of disappointed that you didn't
Yes.
sing.
Well, I did it lowly, because, see, when somebody's leading, I try not to exert too much. The lead is supposed to be the loudest, see?
Yeah, but
That's-
I don't know.
yeah.
I don't know.
Well,
I'm first
well,
time here. I was trying
Sure.
to
Well,
singing, but
another time I can do it better, and I can do it, because I've done this. Even before I became a monk, I did this 11 times every day.
oh, how many times?
11 times every day. Because part of the trouble is that we all need to have money and wealth enough to be able to support our beliefs, to support whoever we can in this world, so that everybody has an opportunity to be presented with the Buddha. And so if we don't have that wealth, it's not going to happen, So it's not like we're praying for money, but I'm sorry to just go off on tangent, but that's part of it. I'm nearsighted, so my glasses are not good up close. Farsighted, nearsighted, yeah. I almost had cataract surgery, but it got called away. I had to cancel all my appointments. I had to go to a big funeral in Taiwan 3 weeks ago. It was amazing. I've never seen so many monks and nuns in one place. But we start this Zhengdian Deba Doche Sambala Chasalo. Zhengdian Deba Doche Sambala Chasalo. Zhengdian Deba Doche Sambala Chasalo. Om Vanzer Sado Samaya Nanu Balaya. Now I might break, because sometimes when we do this, there's a recording where we just zip through it straight, no tonal inflections. But other times we sing it. And so I'm kind of doing it halfway in between. Man, Allah. Banzer Sado Samaya Manu Balaya Banzer Sado Deno Badi Chaje Do Me Bala Sudo Kayo Me Bawa Subo Kayo Me Bawa Anula Do Me Bawa Sawa Shiri Me Sayacha Sawa Kama Susame Jidang Jilya Guru Hum Ah 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 ho Bamber when Sawa Data Gada Banzer Mame Mucha Baji Bawa Maha Samaya Sado Ha. Now, my mouth is kind of dry, so I apologize because I'm a little not level with these. But I have to say, in the middle here, it's got Sudo Kayo Meba Wa, Anulado Meba Wa, Sudo Kayo Meba Wa. There's 3 phrases. And in different versions, they say those phrases in different sequence. So he's used to a different sequence than what this reads, actually. So he put the Anulado Meba Wa in the middle of the 2. And that's very frequent. We have books that have it that way, rather than this way. This book has come out just only the last year. So sometimes they switch things a little bit. So that's one of the things as you learn. You may hear it sometimes, things just a little bit off. They may say something different. And until you've done it a while, it can throw you a loop or a loop. It used to do that for me. So I don't know. I'm not going to do the whole thing over and over again, but
Thank
it's
you.
a little bit. You're welcome.
Okay.
Sure, yeah.
Because I listen to YouTube all the time, that's why I love hear that sound.
I love it too.
Yes.
I hear again, but I don't know how to memorize, but I like to hear hourly.
Yeah.
I think I have a connection with this.
Yes,
instrument.
yes.
Very-
That's very good.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah, because it's very powerful. Yeah.
Is there a DVD do we have a DVD for by Jimmy?
The
The
Jimmy.
100. Yeah, so there's a DVD so we can listen to it.
The way I did was recorded by the master, the guru. Yeah, that's why I learned it and then I keep it doing now.
Yeah. So that's, as you can see, what we call the God of Wealth. You know, he has all of these little lumpy things. Those are supposedly like little things of money, all like gold or things like that. Yeah, and it's very interesting. And then he also has a weasel or some kind of a rodent on his arm.
I think there's one right here, right?
Yes.
It's a rat, isn't it?
Well, there's various interpretations. I've heard it as a weasel. I don't know why, because a rat has worse connotations.
How about stoat?
Yeah, there you go. But it's, a rat gathers things, so a rat might be appropriate too, because a rat
Stoat,
gathers.
weasel, same.
So, stoat, yeah. It's, yeah. So, and he's so fierce looking, you know. Now we had a representation in our temple for a number of years of the yellow jumbo. He's a man from China. He ran a Chinese newspaper there, and I just heard that he just died. But when I first went to this organization, we would be doing these chants, and all of a sudden he would break out in this big hideous laugh. Oh, I wondered what the dickens, you know. He looked back, you know, and he, I can't really do it, but he would be doing this, and then he would say some words and things and stuff, and then he'd quiet down, and maybe he'd do it later. Well, the Guru says he has the yellow jumbo inside of him, and it comes out sometimes. So, you know, it was almost like a Christian practice where they start speaking in tongues. So, oh, would you like me to do that now? Sure. We can do a short demonstration. Okay, if you'd like to bring it over.
I'm so sorry. I'm over.
It's after 12, so. things we do is we strike it 3 times and we pray to the Buddhas before we do this. Because it's a healing ritual and we want to have their blessings. I'll pray silently a little bit. Which is Mandarin for let us pray. Let us pray for the blessings of the Medicine Buddha. is really strong. I can hardly hold it. So I hope that helped everyone. It's medicine Buddha bless us all. And help us towards healing and towards our spiritual path. And may the Jambala help us towards our everyday needs. Thank you. Let's adjourn.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll go up and take my gown off and then come back. I'll be down just basically underneath the road here.
I am so sorry. I'm not normally a jack in the box. My knee is,
I know, it's a
just
long
can't
sitting.
get comfortable.
Yeah, no, you're fine.
What happened to your knee? Yeah.
We'll do whatever you want.
这要还吗？谢谢。
谢谢。I don't want to think that I'm being ungrateful or anything. It's just situational.
If you sit up in the chair, I'll help you out.
You know, I didn't ask her, and for us, I mean, I just assumed that she was giving them to us, but as we started writing things, and I went, oh my God, what if she wants us back? Well, I'll pay for it if that's the case.
I know that your Buddhism journey didn't start with Guru, so Guru is different. Yeah. So I wonder, like, how you feel about it, the difference, and what change you have made,
Well,
like if you compare
Sure,
Guru and 10
sure,
years
I can
ago.
explain a little bit. I guess when I first started, there were a number of masters at two different temples that we attended in Portland, and there was some turnover. So there were some nuns and some masters, but the old master got too old. He was there, and he spoke no English, and all he did was Amitabha Sutra all the time, which was fine. I mean, that was a learning experience, just to do that practically most of the time. Then he got replaced, and there was two nuns there, and they're the ones that encouraged me. That was after my first year of study, to go to Los Angeles to the Fogwan Shannon Shilai Temple, the immense temple in Los Angeles that's just beautiful. And I went down there, and I joined a lot of Western people as we took refuge with Chen Yin, a big master from Taiwan at the time, took refuge in the precepts from him. And that was my introduction to join Buddhism. But he's not a teacher here, see. And then things were different. At the temples, we were going to two different temples, and there was still some turnover in the leadership in the temples and things. And then we both got busy. I had a new job, and she became a mortgage broker at the time. Things were going up. And she became really busy because she was able at that time to do a lot of loans for people that didn't have straightforward deals. She could get them decent loans, not those killer loans, but decent loans when they didn't have documentation, which a lot of time that's almost impossible. But she dealt with restaurant owners, cash people, different things like that. And she was getting them a lot of mortgages and helping the community a whole lot that way. She just did a lot of it. And she wasn't doing those negative equity loans. She would not sell a loan to somebody that didn't understand how the thing worked. And we had a few people that did that we were associated with that never liked their business. And I don't think the people that did the loans, they did the loans would never talk to them again. But we got so busy, we couldn't attend the Buddhist temple hardly at all. And we'd moved across town 30 miles away. And so both those things made it difficult. And we kind of dropped out. We didn't attend very often at all. And that's when some of the people that had been one of those Buddhist temples told us about the guru. He was in downtown Portland at a small location in our old town, Chinatown. And I started to go down there. And the thing was that when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. Basically, they always say that, you know, and there's truth to it. I mean, and I was ready to have a teacher because I was not necessarily, I was getting advice and guidance some, but I was not getting taught very much, very sporadic. And so with him, I had more patience because I could sense there was something different. And all the people that were drawn to him were really dedicated to what he was doing. And we had a practitioner there who did Qigong for a while too, and he had us do, I did a bunch of classes with him, and I was amazed at the muscles in my body that I could move that I had no idea I could control. Although I've lost some of that ever since, but that was interesting. But we had a couple of levels, and the teaching level was very different. I only had part-time translators, so I didn't get a lot of direct information, but there was something about him and the way he did it, and this style, the tantric Tibetan style, that was fascinating to me. I hadn't seen this style before because I've been going to the regular Pure Land Buddhist temples, and they're fine. I mean, they're good, but this type of thing, it's more in line, and I think I talked about that this morning a little bit with finding a guru, a teacher that you can follow, and you don't follow them blindly, but you try to give your full respect and attention to them in order to get everything you can. And I've read since then, I mean, some of the masters themselves, and I know our master, the guru, he changed teachers a few times in his life. He went, because you get to a point sometimes where it's not working quite right, and you have to seek out something different. You're not getting the growth in the way, I guess, that you might think you have been, and I haven't found that point with our guru at this point yet, because it's been a slow process, honestly, with the language difficulties and everything. So I've given it time, and I can appreciate as time goes on that I'm giving it time, because it's been very rewarding and a very different thing. And it's very challenging at times, because he can be the nicest, easiest guy in the world, but he can be very strict. Now, I'm pretty fortunate because as his primary English-speaking student, he doesn't hardly ever criticize me or pick on me and stuff like he does on some of his Chinese students that he expects to be following me, because he knows sometimes I don't understand the things. But so I feel a little bit spoiled that way, and yet with with the translations that come through, with what he's telling us all to do and everything, sometimes it's very hard, and it's a challenge, and sometimes even like with any teacher, I don't agree with what he's doing, but it's not on moral principles or anything, legalities or any of those things. It just may be the way he's doing it, because I don't understand. Because he's at this level and I'm at this level, you know. and so he can't always express why he's doing things to us. It just doesn't work sometimes, or why he's building these things and doing even the day-to-day work in the method that he uses, which we have a lot of volunteer work, and we had a lot of things at this one location that he kept having people come and move them from one place to another place to another place. And everybody's, you know, what's going on? But that's part of the challenge of accepting teaching and accepting a person that's trying to teach you, because he may be imparting something with that technique that's a little different that you have to realize. And because that's one of my teachings now that that I have to think about every day when I pray, that, we have certain chants in the morning, and I do, and there's some of them in English I do, I can follow in the Chinese, but may all sentient beings have happiness and the cause of happiness. May all sentient beings be free of suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings never be separated from the happiness that knows of suffering. May all sentient beings live in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. So those aren't very many words, but there's really something very deep that you have to accept to follow those kinds of things, to try to be tolerant of everybody you can, even when they're trying to hurt you. And of course, I don't advocate people get walked over or lay down, but sometimes we do have to accept that our enemies have something to teach us. And when I was in the Army, I learned that too. That as a warrior in the military, the strength of your being a warrior depends upon the strength of your enemy. And that's an ancient saying here by the Native Americans. Because they didn't always kill each other, they fought a lot, but a lot of times they just went out and did the touch. They would steal into a camp and strike somebody with a stick and leave. Counting coup is what they call it. You know, and so that took extreme dedication to be able to do those things. Well, in this life today, a lot of times we have a lot of things that are going bad and going on, and we have to do the best we can to help everybody we can. And sometimes we just have to be tolerant of those people that are less aware of the humanity of everyone. And that's what I feel like. They're at a different stage. They don't have the understanding that what they do hurts people. And we can't necessarily correct them by arguing with them or striking them or anything. It's like on their journey, they have to get to that point themselves, which is difficult to accept. It's very difficult. So anyway, that's the other thing. I pray that, always pray that I have the tolerance to bear all things. Because in our lifetimes, if we believe in reincarnation, basically we're going to experience everything from the worst to the best. And I believe, ever since I was small, that I had been here before. I didn't know what, I had no clue. I couldn't remember anything, but I knew I'm here again. It's a little bit deja vu-y like, but it's like I'm starting this over again. I have another chance as a human, and that's what all we can pray for until we can reach the stages that are higher levels and things like that. That we continue to grow while we're in this kind of form as we go on, because I do believe in reincarnation. It's a difficult thing to grasp, and it's difficult for a lot of Christianity to understand, and the people who follow the Christian beliefs. But there are things that are part of Christianity that if you read deep enough, they'll talk about some of these things. Because what else are the prophets that come? Basically, they're reincarnations of the teachers from before in Christianity as well. It's my belief anyway. But that's, yeah. So it's a good journey. We try to make the best of our journey and then enjoy what we can as we can, and help those people we can help as we can help them, you know, and try to ease the suffering in the world, because that's one of the main things. And we have so many people that don't get any acknowledgement for relieving suffering in this life, but they're gaining merit. And the merit that you gain from doing those kinds of things, it doesn't have to be acknowledged by anybody. You'll know yourself, basically. And that's one of the things, when we do a lot of these things, and the rituals are that way, we're doing them to gain the merit such that we can overcome the obstacles that sometimes we set before ourselves, the mistakes we make and the things like that, to keep our growth going as far as the ability to survive this body and move on, however that is. Whether it is totally reincarnation that's separate or what it is. But I read some very esoteric things by some of the Tibetan people about how reincarnation works, and it's very difficult to understand, because it's almost like reading scientific stuff, basically, that granular level. But that's what, anyway, that's what my beliefs are, and that's what we have to always remember. Sometimes when we do good things, that we don't necessarily need a big thank you, a great big, it's wonderful. It's nice when that can happen. I mean, that's rewarding. But if we're doing it out of the kindness of our heart and our compassion, then that's reward enough. That's the part that I feel, you know, okay. It's like, and I'm blessed to have found the Guru and be along this path at this point. I can't predict the future, but you know, we will see. But I'm on this path to help him, and I'll keep helping him as much as I can. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's past the time, so you're free to leave, but if you want to stay more, you could. And also, normally, we make it into habit, like when we have like Guru Lama coming, then people are welcome to stay to have dinner with us. We'll just prepare dinner together, and we could eat dinner together. So that's how it is. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.